Welcome back to the On the Money and Allied Wealth YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here. If you like the content we're putting out, folks, give us a like down below. Hit the subscribe button as well. We'll put you on the list, and as we push new content out to add value to what you're trying to accomplish with investments, tax planning, Social Security, health care, we'll push this content out to you as it comes out. So thanks so much for being a subscriber and being here today. You've heard me talk a lot about risk, and we oftentimes look at portfolios and evaluate portfolios based on average annual return. And it's kind of like, hey, I mean, I've got this portfolio here. It's got a 12% rate of return. Don't you want some of that? Well, heck yeah, 12% is a great rate of return, but there's a better question involved. And so the question becomes this. Let's say I've got investment A, investment B, and investment C. Investment A has a 10% rate of return. Investment B has a 10% rate of return, and investment C has a 10% rate of return. Which investment's best for you? Well, the answer is we could do it one of two ways. We could say, hey, why don't I put 1/3 of my money in each investment and see how it does? But the other option is we don't really have enough information to make the best decision. And what I mean by that is this. We're looking at the average annual return going, that sounds pretty good, but that's only part of the story we need to have before we can choose to put our money in one of these buckets. So the other side of the story is downside. And let's say that investment A has a downside of 20%. Investment B has a downside of 15%. And investment C has a downside of 5%. Well, now I ask you, which investment is best for you? And without a doubt, folks, it is answer C here, because answer C has a positive 10% return and only a negative 5% downside risk potential. So we wouldn't allocate our money in A, B, and C equally. We put it all in option C. And that's what I'm trying to paint the picture of to kind of help illustrate the metrics you really need to think about on selecting a portfolio. We just proved here that all of these have a 10% average annual rate of return, but that's only half the story. And really what we just did is we made the decision to invest based on the downside risk of the portfolio instead of the average annual return. So how do you figure out what the downside in the portfolios are when you're looking at and selecting investments? Because again, we're often just showing the average annual rate of return. If it's high enough, we jump right in. Well, the way you do it, folks, is you look at something called standard deviation. And standard deviation sounds like very complicated, but it really isn't. It's a measure of risk expressed in a percentage. And so the way you look at this is on what we call a bell curve. And let's just say that this portfolio has an average return of 10%, but the standard deviation, so we'll do average here, is 10%. But the SD, standard deviation, is 18%. So what that is wobble factor. And let me show you how it impacts the portfolio. So the middle of the road here, average, is 10% using a bell curve. And oftentimes we see when markets go up, they do go up, but they typically will only go up one standard deviation as far as getting some extra growth. And what I mean by that is if the portfolio moves to the upside plus one standard deviation of 18%, that means our total return in a really good year could actually be higher than 10% and be as much as 18% if the portfolio goes up really good in a strong market. And that's a possibility. And that sounds great, folks. A 28% return is pretty solid. However, what we've got to think about is what if it goes the other way? Because you'll notice, for instance, in the COVID crash, the market fell off a cliff really fast. And we always say that markets will decline much faster than they rise. And it took a while for the market to get back to where it was after the COVID crash, and we started to realize that things are going to be okay. Well, that downside risk oftentimes, or the downside of the market oftentimes moves outside of one standard deviation, outside of two standard deviations, and is typically 3 standard deviations in a major market downturn event. So what does that mean? Well, if we move 1 standard deviation to the downside, that's minus 18% here, that means our first standard deviation is a potential downside of 8%. And then if we move another standard deviation unit of 18, we are down 26%. And if we move again, another standard deviation unit, we're down 44%. And folks, all I'm doing is subtracting 10% from minus 18%, and then adding another standard deviation unit there. 18 and 8 is 26%, adding those together, and then adding another unit to 26% to get 44%. And that's where that math comes from. But what I'm trying to illustrate to you here is that if markets decline much faster than they rise, and often decline in major market downturn events as much as 3 standard deviations, that means our portfolio here with this average annual return of 10% could lose as much as 44% in a major down market. Well, let's put that in dollar terms. If I've got $1 million and I go down 44%, I just lost $440,000. Well, I got a question for you. Are you okay losing that much in the event that we have a major market downturn? And most people aren't. That's a life-changing event there, and it could force a lifestyle change, or maybe you'd have to go back to work in your golden years. So folks, the point behind this video is that do not focus on average annual return. It is important, obviously, but the most important fact is how much risk am I taking to get the return? That's expressed in standard deviation in the form of a percentage, and that's a metric you absolutely should consider when choosing an investment portfolio for your money. I'm Ryan Wheless with On the Money TV and Allied Wealth. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this video. If you like the video, please give us a like down below, hit the subscribe button, and you'll be pushed out the new content as it comes out on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much.